Want to get back to the major issue facing Washington. That is your tax dollars and the fiscal cliff. It hits in about 45 days. Democrats say the tax rates must go up for certain Americans. But where do Republicans stand on that today? Kevin McCarthy, House Majority Whip, the California Republican, is with me in studio. And good morning to you.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
It's good to see you again. You picked a good time of the year to be in New York City. Where are we right now?
Well, they just had their first meeting down at the White House. There is a bipartisan way to do this, that you want to make sure that you gather revenues, but you get a pro-growth agenda. That means you don't raise the tax rates. There's ways to close loopholes, limit loopholes, but you need a pro-growth. You want to reform the tax code where we can create more jobs. You don't want to harm small business. And also the president talks about a balanced approach, getting at least 2.5 to 3 times as much in cuts, and that's what we're looking at too. Where can we find those cuts in government? Where can we take a pro-growth agenda and grow this economy for small business?
I want to be very specific about this now, because
yes.
A lot of folks, they may lose the meaning of the definition when we talk about revenue.
Yes.
And we talk about tax rates.
Yes.
Because you're talking about the left hand.
Yeah.
And Nancy Pelosi is saying, forget it. The only way you're going to get a deal is if you raise the tax rates. Is that a game stopper?
Well, the president isn't saying that. Remember this. Then Nancy said last May that it had to be a tax increase on those $1 million and more. So she keeps changing the game plan. That can't be the case. If the president just went and changed the tax rates, okay, that's pays for 8 days. Where do we go for there? The president also says that he wants a balanced approach, 2.5 cuts. We haven't heard of where his cuts are. The difference here is if we're talking about revenue, there are ways to do it in a bipartisan manner. If you look at the Ernst & Young report, if you go and raise those tax rates, that hits small business. It could cut 700,000 jobs out of the economy. So you don't want to hurt the economy.
And you got to think Democrats don't want that either. But what I hear you saying is that the president is not in lockstep with Nancy Pelosi when it comes to tax rates versus revenue. Meaning and suggesting that he may go along with your deal as opposed to raising tax rates. Do you see that as a possibility?
I see it as a possibility. I think elections are over. Let's sit down and find a bipartisan way that we can solve this problem, not go to a fiscal cliff, while at the same time have a pro-growth agenda where we grow jobs. Now, I watched the president at his press conference said, did it have to be that? He says he was open to listening to ideas from Republicans. Speaker Boehner was just down there at the White House on Friday. It's the beginning. We want to show him if he wants to gain revenues, we're more than willing to talk about closing loopholes, limiting loopholes.
Which loophole would you close?
Well, we'll sit down and lay them all up on the table. There are a lot of ways that you can go through, but we have to have reforms. What you need to do, too, the structural change. You have to have structural change, otherwise you're going to continue to have trillion-dollar deficits.
Based on your experience in working with President Obama, is he willing to go for significant tax reform? Change the whole program?
Look, that
would be historical.
We will not get out of this mess without growing this economy. And the only way to do that is to have structural reform and tax reform. And this isn't something that Republicans have sat back on. We have passed legislation already that sets up the framework to have tax reform. We've passed it to take away the sequestration that he says in the debate will not happen. We have already passed all that in the House. A lot of it sits in the Senate.
I need to get to one final point here. Yeah. If there's a bill that's presented on the floor of the House that increases the tax rates for people making $250,000 or more, $1 million or more per year, would that bill pass in the House of Representatives with Republican leadership?
Look, what the president says, he wants a balanced approach. You cannot get there just by raising the 2 tax rates. That pays for 8 days. So what do you do with the rest of the problem? You've got to find reforms in it where you have cuts, but you've got to grow this economy. And the only way to do that is overall tax reform. That's what we're talking to the president about. And we're talking to the president about if he wants revenues. We're not saying no to revenues. What we're saying to is you don't get that by raising the tax rates. You get that by loopholes.
Just to nail this thing into the wall here, okay? If it were tax rates, you're saying that does not pass. Tax rates, not revenue.
It hurts the economy. Remember, when the Democrats controlled all 2 years ago, they had the ability to raise the tax rates. What did they say and what did the president say? You do not raise rates in a tough economy. They chose not to do it. This economy is still in a very difficult situation. The Ernst & Young report shows you will hit small business, which is the best job growth, and you'd lose 700,000 jobs. Why would the president change his mind now? We want to sit there in a bipartisan way, solve this fiscal cliff, find the cuts, and reform where we unshackle America.
Thank you, sir. Have a good trip home to California. Kevin McCarthy here in New York. Nice to see you in person.
Nice to see you.